Yesterday, towards the end of the afternoon, you were you were describing your investigation, the actions, the duties, or the acts that you undertook in order to proceed with your investigation involving the defendant Denzel Suitt, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you told us about one of those things that you had to do was to pull CCTV, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in fact, you did request you requested CCTV from the vicinity of the alleged incident, correct?
Yes.
And how many cameras did you specifically request from?
4.
Okay. Yesterday we watched one of those, and that was from Bayside Terrace and Richard Street, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In this video that you found useful in your investigation. Okay. Can you tell us what the first timestamp would be? Okay, Marcus, if you could, pause, please. Sergeant, why did you find this footage to be significant in your investigation?
At this point, a Jersey City police radio car entered Bayside Park from Garfield Avenue and entered the parking. It drove towards the U-turn that exits onto Richard Street.
Okay. Sergeant, can you just initial this picture and then we'll capture it and mark it? Sergeant, your report is still in front of you. What would the next time be that was significant in your investigation, if any, that would be contained in your report?
On this camera?
For this particular camera. I think you just told us 12:52:30, and then the next one would be
12:53:06.
okay. So we're now at 12:52:53. So let's just let it play since it's so close. Pause it. What would the next significant time be that you found for your investigation on this particular camera?
It would be 12:53:16.
Okay. And do you recall what you found significant about that particular timestamp?
The radio car that just exited the park turns south onto Bayside Terrace.
Can you, without obstructing the view of Bayside Terrace, indicate on your screen where that could, what you're talking about, basically the direct south, the southern direction of travel that you saw? Okay. And is that arrow is running parallel to a street on the right? Is that correct?
Yes.
And what street is that?
Bayside Terrace.
Okay. If you need to look at your report again, that's fine. Just let us know. But what would the next? We're now on to the next timestamp, if any, that you found significant on this particular video. Is there another timestamp?
Yes.
Sure. Okay. Marcus, if you could jump ahead to a little bit before that, you could just do 105:59 would be fine. Okay, you can stop it. Sergeant, why did you find that 10612 was significant to your investigation?
The radio car that entered Bayside Terrace was now leaving Bayside Terrace.
Okay. And can you tell us why 13528 was significant to your investigation?
This camera and the Bayside Park Richard Street camera, the other camera, both observe at 135 the white four-door sedan exiting Bayside Terrace,
Okay.
traveling north.
And do you recall, without looking at your report, why the white four-door sedan was significant to your investigation?
Mr. Palm said he was driving a white four-door sedan.
Did you obtain video footage from the Jersey City Police Department South District?
Yes,
Where is the South District located?
191 Bergen Avenue,
What would the first timestamp be?
2:39 a.m.
Okay. Okay, pause it now. Sergeant, why did you find 23939 thereabout to be significant in your investigation?
At this time, a white four-door sedan pulls up in front of the South District and two males come out of it and approach the South.
And you said there was a second time that you found also to be helpful in your investigation. What time would that have been?
2:42.
Okay, Marcus, you can let it play. Thank you. Jump ahead to 24200. That would be, if it's too small to move around, it's okay. Okay, give me a second. Sergeant, why did you find this 240, 242 timestamp to be significant to your investigation?
At this time, two males exited the South District.
Okay. And when you say the two males, are those the two males or different males than the ones that you just stated the
They are
videos?
the same males.
They're the same males.
Morning, sir. How are you? Prior to working in internal affairs, you worked at the South District, correct? For some of your career?
Yes,
What portion of your career did you work in the South District?
from 2009 to 2015.
So 6 years or so? And the South District in 2009 to 2015, it didn't change by the time frame we're dealing with here in 2018, right? It was the same areas that were patrolled, correct?
The park was not built in 2009.
Okay. But during your tour, it was built, correct?
Yes,
Okay. So you're familiar with that?
yes,
And you would agree with me that as part, you were in patrol in the South District at some point?
yes,
Were you in patrol in the South District when the park was open?
yes,
So you would agree with me that as part of your tour in the South District is to go through that park, correct?
yes,
So when you saw the police car, when we watched the police car go through the park, and you pointed it out on the timestamps and everything else, that would have been a typical part of the tour, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we also saw the police car, and I could be wrong, I think, but driving across what looked like a sidewalk, right? To go into the park? The backside of the park there? Do you recall that?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. When we saw the police car initially, when you identified it, and it came right in front of the camera that was, I think it was the last one we watched, the Bayside Park and Richard Street camera. The police car leaves the road to get into the park, correct? It goes through the sidewalk to get into
Yes,
the park.
yes.
Is that how you got in? That was typical as well?
It's typical to enter the park either from the U-turn or from a ramp on Garfield Street.
But to get in by the U-turn from the way that car was traveling, there was no other way to get in. That's how you have to get in, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And then the police car, we saw go down the road and then come back out, correct?
yes,
And that's the dead end we were talking about?
yes,
Okay. So it's fair to say that from the cameras we watched, we're on the opposite side of Bayside Terrace from where any of the information about what took place here you received, right?
yes.
In your investigation, Ms. Brown went over a number of things that you did in your investigation, correct? Now, you were shown, and I think it was S9, which was your April 19th report, correct? And that's what's actually sitting in front of you, which I'm actually taking this from your refresher recollection. That was what S9, that's in April 19th, 2018 report?
Yes,
You completed a report before that, correct?
yes,
And that was an April 11th report?
yes,
Okay. Did they contain the same information?
no,
You updated it,
yes,
so you added to it in those 8 days based upon information that you received.
yes,
So the most updated report that you did in this case is the April 19th, 2018.
yes,
So as you sit here today, this was the most accurate information that you could provide then.
yes,
And again, after April 19th, nothing came to you that you saw the necessity to update S9, right?
Can you rephrase that
Sure.
question?
April 19th, 2018, you wrote this report, which is marked S9. Before that, you told us you wrote a report, your first report, which was April 11th. Nothing after April 19th came to you that you needed to update this report, correct?
Other information was given to me and did come to me, but I sent it directly to the prosecutor's office.
So you never updated this report.
No,
Now, you discussed your investigation. You did ultimately go to that dead end of Bayview Terrace, correct?
yes,
And when you got there, there were 2 cameras there, correct?
yes,
They're on the same level.
yes.
I'm going to show you what's marked D1 for identification. Does Madam Bishop recognize that photograph?
Yes.
Did this come, see, is this a picture that you created, or how did this come to your?
This was emailed to me by OEM, our Office of Emergency
Okay.
Management.
But you've seen this photograph?
Yes,
Okay. And to the best of your knowledge, this is a fair and accurate depiction of what the end of that block looked like on March 25th, 2018? As far as the camera, I'm not worried
Yes.
about the trees or the cars or anything else.
Yes.
I'm just talking about the pole with the cameras.
yes,
That's the photograph that I just showed you?
yes,
Okay. And there's a black pole there with a red box with wording in it pointing at the pole, correct?
yes,
Okay. And that's the pole with the 2 cameras on it, obviously, as it says there.
yes,
And those would have been the 2 cameras that were closest to the area that you believe the white car was parked that night.
yes,
Did you get any video from those cameras?
no,
Did you try to?
yes,
Now, when you, to the best of your knowledge, were those cameras there when you did patrol in the South District?
yes,
And that was something you knew about, correct?
yes,
It's fair to say that you knew about most of these cameras then, here in the South District, in Bayview Park, Bayside Park, and Bayview Terrace, and all these areas we discussed, right?
Yes.
Is that something that you were taught by your supervisors or told typically?
We would look into cameras as part of investigations or accidents. So we learned over time where the cameras were located.
So in your opinion, somebody that was working in the South District for a period of time would know where the cameras were, right?
Yes.
Everything that came to your attention in this investigation took place on the early morning hours of March 25th, 2018, correct? The interaction, let me rephrase the question, that was a bad question, I apologize. So the initial interaction that you're told about between the gentleman in the white car and Jersey City police officers is about 2 o'clock in the morning on March 25th, correct?
I believe I was initially told it was 12 noon.
But from your review of everything that we've kind of gone over and the cameras you've watched, do you come to realize that everything that that's being talked about is sometime after midnight on March 25th, 2018?
Yes.
So nothing related to the interaction between the police officers and the gentleman took place on March 24th, correct?
Not that I know.
And the trip to Domino's Pizza that you're told about took place on March 25th as well, correct? And when you went to Domino's and the video we watched, you spoke to the manager about the time.
Yes.
And you ultimately come to find out that the time is off by 1 hour, correct?
That's what he told me.
Do you have any other information? As you sit here today, do you believe anything other than it was off by 1 hour?
That's what he told me.
Now, in your, either you know or in your training as a police officer, do you know what military time is? What time is 1300?
1 p.m.
1 in the afternoon, correct? You were shown, or in your investigation, you came into possession of the role for the South District that night, correct?
Yeah.
That's where you started, trying to narrow down who could have been the police officers. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And you talked about with the prosecutor, the people that you eliminated and a variety of other things that you did to narrow it down, correct?
Yes.
And that ultimately led you to the pictures that you were shown.
Yes.
Okay. One of the individuals that was working that night is an Officer Truesdale, right?
Yes.
Officer Truesdale, you stated that he was not put into the photo, correct? And that was because he was African American.
Yes.
Is that correct? Either then or at some point during the course of your investigation, did you determine what race Denzel Suitt was?
No.
So you're not aware that he's African American?
I did not know him.
Do you know now that he's African American?
Yes.
Do you know Officer Truesdale?
Yes.
Do you believe that he has a similar or same complexion to Mr. Suitt?
I don't recall.
Don't recall. And after you went through that, you picked out 6 photographs, correct?
Yes.
That you showed Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
And that was the video we watched yesterday, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Palms chose 2 guys and a third as a maybe, correct?
Yes.
And you would agree with me from what we watched that the maybe was he kept saying was related to his brother, right?
Yes.
Okay. And he picked out 2 guys. He said it was one of these 2 guys that interacted with me, correct?
Yes.
And those 2 guys were who?
Officer Osorio and Officer Suitt.
And those 2 guys were, you determined, or we can see from that sheet, they were working together that night, correct?
Yes.
And that was Mr. Suitt, correct? And that's S4A.
Yes.
And that was Mr. Osorio, correct?
Yes.
And that's S4B.
Yes.
And the information you had was that it was 2 Hispanic males, correct?
Yes.
What race is Officer Osorio?
Osorio is Hispanic.
He's Hispanic, correct? Now, you discussed with Ms. Krauthammer about equipment inspection forms and log sheets, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we went over the log sheets, or Ms. Krauthammer went over the log sheets with you and said that you went through them and said that there was nothing noted on there about something that took place on Bayview Terrace, correct?
Yes.
And that included Osorio and Suitt's log sheet.
Sorry, Bayside.
Bayside, excuse me, I keep saying Bayview, I think, I apologize. Bayside Terrace, I'm not trying to confuse you, Bayside Terrace. And you said that there was nothing noted on the log sheet, which was S11 for Osorio and Suitt, as well as S12 through S18, which were the other log sheets that you had, correct?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that the log sheet was the responsibility of the passenger in a patrol vehicle?
I can't say
Okay. If I told you that on that night, the responsibility was Officer Osorio, who was the passenger, would that be against protocol, or that's okay?
that. It would not be against the protocol.
Okay. When you drove the vehicle, who typically did the log sheet?
It depended on who the senior officer was. The senior officer might determine that, and there were times where I drove the vehicle and I also completed the log, and there were times that I was the passenger and I completed the log.
So if I said to you that it was common practice in the South District for the passenger to do the log sheet, you'd say, no, that's not true.
I cannot say it's not true.
Okay. Now, does every car in the South District that night, the South District that night responsible for doing one of these log sheets?
Yes.
Okay. Can you show me, and let me just ask you the first question. We watched a video where an African-American gentleman approached a patrol car, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you determined through your investigation that that was a patrol car of Officers No and Chavarria?
Yes.
Can you tell me if Officer No and Chavarria put on their log sheet that they had that interaction?
I would have to, I know they did not put that interaction on their sheet.
Okay. So they didn't put that interaction on the sheet either?
No.
Okay. And as a matter of fact, you would agree with me from your investigation that Officer No and Officer Osorio didn't even call in that interaction, correct?
That's correct.
That the first time that they mentioned that to anybody is when Sergeant Peretti arrives.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. The video we watched, you told us that after the gentleman spoke with the fixed location car, which we now know is Officer No and Officer Chavarria, another vehicle pulled up. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you told us that that was Sergeant Peretti.
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree with me from your investigation, you determined that the first time those two officers mentioned this interaction was to Sergeant Peretti?
Yes.
Okay. And Sergeant Peretti asked them why you didn't call it in, correct?
I don't know.
You don't know that? Okay, fair enough. I'll ask him. But you told us that the practice, or what's supposed to be done, is that this interaction should have been listed on the log sheet, correct?
Yes.
And that this interaction should have been called into dispatch, correct?
Which interaction?
The interaction between Officer No and Chavarria and the African-American gentleman.
Typically based on, I don't know what Mr. Davis said to Chavarria and No, but if it was an allegation against an officer, typically that is not radioed over the air.
Okay. Is it told to someone?
It would be told to somebody, they would keep it quiet until they can investigate it.
But in this case, that's not what happened, correct? They didn't call anyone.
As the video shows, they approached the sergeant.
Have you, in the course of your investigation, come across anything that shows that you heard or you saw that Officer No and Officer Chavarria, keep pronouncing it, Chavarria, let anybody know about this before the sergeant arrived at the scene?
Not that I know.
As part of your investigation, did you have an opportunity to review the original CAD reports in this case? Sure. As part of your investigation, you know what a CAD report is?
Yes.
What is it?
It's a report for an event that is called in.
Okay. As part of the, and that's typical of any event that's called in Jersey City, correct?
Yes.
It's done on a report that is commonly called a CAD report.
Yes.
Okay. As part of your investigation in this case, did you have an opportunity to review the CAD reports of the calls that came in?
Yes.
Do you recall that the CAD report indicated that not only that the caller had something stolen from him as well?
Yes.
And we know now from listening to it that the caller turned out to be Mr. Davis, correct?
Yes.
Did that turn out to be accurate?
Not that I know.
So the original report was that Mr. Davis had something stolen from him as well, correct? And as we've gone through this, we know that as of now that turned out not to be true.
Yes.
Now, as we watched, just jump into those videos again, and just going through kind of as your testimony, so I do apologize for jumping around a little bit. As we went through those videos and we saw that what you identified to be the police car, at no time did we see that police car with its lights off, did we? Headlights, I'm sorry.
With its headlights
Headlights
off.
off.
I have to review the whole video.
Well, just the portions we watched. At any point in the video, either when the car came into the park across the sidewalk, or when you identified it as the police car leaving the road, did the car have its lights on or lights off?
I think the lights were on.
Right. That's a good question. Now, the next video that you were shown was the South District, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what we watched there, that's the entrance to the South District, right?
Yes.
And the two gentlemen that you said got out of the white car, they go into the South District, correct?
Yes.
And we watched it or it got fast forwarded, but they're in there for, I think according to your report, about 2.5 minutes, right?
Yes.
And then they come back out.
Yes.
But there's no doubt in your mind that they entered the South District right there.
They entered the first door of the South District, as far as I know.
Right. But we don't see them standing on the steps, or we don't see them, you know, for those 2.5 minutes, you know, stewing around outside or talking on cell phones. They're clearly inside the door.
Correct.
Working the desk that night?
Officer Kudiak?
As part of your investigation, did you interview Officer Kudiak?
No.
Thank you. Congratulations.
When you conducted the photo array that Mr. Hirschorn was asking about, when you conducted it with the victim in the case, Jermaine Palms, he made 2 identifications, correct?
Yes.
And did he specify, we watched the video yesterday, correct?
Yes.
And he selected 2 photographs out of 6, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Hirschorn stated Mr. Hirschorn said Mr. Palms took a 3rd picture and said this is a maybe, correct?
Yes.
And that maybe, did he indicate the maybe was pertaining to the man who dealt with him on Bayside Terrace or the man who dealt with his brother on Bayside Terrace?
The maybe dealt with his brother on Bayside Terrace.
Did Mr. Palm seem hesitant when he made a selection and chose the defendant's photograph out of that photo array?
No.
Did he seem hesitant when he said that this is the man who went in my wallet?
He stated one of these 2, and he held on to both of them.
He said one of these 2, and did he specify one of these 2? Did he specify who dealt with his brother and who dealt with him?
Objection.
I'm showing you
S4B.
S4B is Officer Soriano.
Your investigation revealed that these two were working together in a patrol car, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How long were you a patrol officer before you became a sergeant?
I was a patrol officer for 5 years, and then I became an instructor in the academy.
And while you were a patrol officer, was that in the South District?
Yes.
Okay. And were there times where you were the junior patrol officer in a marked vehicle?
Yes.
And were there times when you kept the call log when you were the passenger?
Yes.
And were there times when you were the driver and you kept the call log?
Yes.
Okay. And if, as a senior, were there times where you were the senior officer in a patrol car?
Yes.
Okay. And when you were the senior officer, were there times that you kept the patrol log?
Generally not.
Call log? Generally not. Who would do it then in those occasions?
If I was the senior officer, the rookie would.
The rookie would. And was it your responsibility to ensure that the rookie would, in fact, do that?
Yes.
Okay. What's the purpose of pairing up a senior and a junior officer?
Rookie officers need training. They need to familiarize themselves with the streets and procedures in the department, so a senior officer would know those things and be able to guide them in their early career.
Okay. And through your investigation, you learned that the defendant, Denzel Suitt, was the senior officer, correct?
Yes.
And he therefore, according to your logic, would have been guiding his partner that night, Kevin Osorio, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to officers No and Shavaria. You didn't come across a log sheet for the two of them, correct?
I do not think I did.
Okay. If I gave you the packet of log sheets that you reviewed yesterday to review, do those contain all of the log sheets you obtained as part of this investigation?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to give those to you, and I'm going to ask you to just review them. And you've gone through both?
Yes.
Okay. Do those contain every report, every event? I keep getting this wrong, I'm sorry. Every call log and every vehicle inspection sheet that you sought and did obtain as part of your investigation here?
Yes.
Is it accurate, based on your testimony yesterday, that those individuals in those packets are Jersey City police officers who were working on the night of March 25th, 2018?
Yes.
Midnight tour?
Yes.
Do you see anywhere in there a call log or event log, call log for officers No and Shavaria?
No.
Do you see whether there is a vehicle inspection form for them, for their car?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And yesterday you testified that it is expected that officers fill out event logs, call logs, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You also obtained dispatch for the period of time in which Mr. Palm said all of this activity had happened, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you come across any recordings or dispatch from officers No and Shavaria?
No.
Okay. Did you come across dispatch from dispatch to Sergeant Peretti and vice versa?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to correct that, it was I obtained calls from the dispatch sergeant. It wasn't dispatched over the air.
Oh.
It was calls from the dispatch sergeant to the south sergeant.
Okay, so it wouldn't be the same as the 911 call we heard yesterday.
It wouldn't have gone over the air. It didn't go over the air.
Why would it?
This is the phone call directly from a radio room sergeant to the south sergeant.
Is it on a city-issued cell phone, or how is the call made? On a different channel on the radio?
It's a city issue. It's a cell phone belonging to it's a radio room phone that is recorded.
Okay.
Yes, it is recorded.
Okay. Why is there a difference let me see if I can phrase this correctly. You indicated on cross that when there are allegations involving police officers, they are not radioed over the air. They are expressed or they're made using the hard line that you just described, correct? Can you say why that is? Do you know why that is?
It's just not general practice to put information like that over the air until a supervisor investigates the claim and sees and checks to see if there's validity to it.
Okay. Did you review any CAD reports in this matter?
Yes.
And do you recall who authored how many CAD reports did you look at?
One.
And do you recall who authored that CAD report?
No.
Okay. Yesterday, I believe we reviewed S10. S10 is the 911 call made by Mr. Davis, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I believe on cross, Mr. Hirschorn was asking you whether or not you agreed with if Mr. Davis told the operator that Mr. Davis had had his property stolen. Correct? He asked you that on cross? Okay. And I'm going to ask you to play the 911 call.
Hello, 911, what's the address? Yes, hey, sir, listen, I was on, oh, shit, no, I was on, hey, bro, stop. My thing is, sir, we just got searched on Baytown Park. Baytown Park. I don't know if they got the rest of whatever have you. They searched me. My name is Jonathan Davis. They said to my brother, and the cop took money and my brother.
I said,
Why are you calling 911?
Okay. So, to clarify, Mr. Davis did discuss his brother losing property, correct?
Yes.
Okay. For people who are not familiar with Bayside Park, is that a high crime area, low crime area? What kind of, please describe it.
Bayside Park, that area, especially because of the proximity to the light rail, has become a high crime area.
And was it a high crime area back on, in 2018?
Yes.
Okay. So when you were on patrol, did you often go through Bayside Park the way that we saw the marked unit go through?
Yes.
Okay. So South District officers, it's not uncommon to find them, including that park and those streets, Richard Street and Bayside Terrace, in their patrol. Would that be fair to say?
Can you repeat?
I'm sorry. So because of the nature of the area, is it common for South District officers to include that neighborhood in their patrol?
Yes.
Okay. You indicated that as a patrol officer in the South District, you had to become familiar with the location of cameras in the South District, correct? Were you, when you were on patrol, were you familiar with the two cameras that Mr. Hirschorn was asking about at the bottom of Bayside Terrace?
Yes.
And was there anything unusual or that sticks out in your mind about those particular cameras?
Absolutely.
What is that?
I was aware that those cameras did not work.
And when were you aware that they didn't work? Like, when did you first become aware that there was a problem with those cameras?
Sometime while I was on patrol, and I finished South Patrol in 2015.
And is that something that you would share with other officers if the cameras were working or not working?
Yes.
And whose responsibility is it? What's the process if a camera is not working? What is an officer supposed to do?
We don't do anything. It's up to CCTV to make notifications, and then I guess the tech company would come out and repair it. That's not up to us.
Okay. And as far as you know, from your investigation, those same cameras that weren't working when you were a patrol officer were not working on the night of the incident, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And just finishing up, going to the footage from the Jersey City Police Department South District. I'm terrible at math. Obviously, Mr. Hirschorn is better, thank you. Those two men that we saw on the video went inside for approximately 2.5 minutes, correct? In your experience as a police officer, how long does it take when a civilian wants to make a report of a crime?
Several minutes, at least 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. And those men went inside, at least inside the front door, and came back out within 2.5 minutes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And as part of your investigation, did you have to explore whether or not there were any complaints, walk-in complaints, at that time made at the South District, correct?
Yes.
And what did you find?
I did not find any reports or tags.
Okay. At this time, I have no further questions.
Officer Creedy has responsibility to take that if he was going to take a complaint, correct?
Yes.
And you didn't come across anything that he did or didn't?
No.
Okay. Now, you were just played a couple of minutes ago, the beginning of a 911 call, and I had asked you previously about the CAD and the gentleman saying that some of his belongings were taken, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember on the recording him saying that as well, or do you need me to play it for you?
I don't remember.
You remember. So in the recording, he says later in that recording that they took his wallet also, correct?
I don't remember why.
Have you ever seen this before?
Yes.
You have. So you know that that's a transcript of the 911 call that we just listened to, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you review that with the call? Did you listen to the call or review that?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that it's an accurate transcript of what comes over the air there at 911, correct, from Mr. Davis to the dispatcher?
Yes.
Okay. If you could look at page 3 for me, about 6 lines down. So that's the second line. Now there it says JD, that's for Mr. Davis, correct?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that it says, they took my brother money, man, they took my wallet.
Yes.
That's referring to himself, obviously, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then, looking at line 13 of that, he says again, it says JD on line 13, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it says, yes, sir, it was a cop car, and I spoke with one of the gentlemen. He took my ID and everything. He ran my name and everything. Right?
Yes.
And then going to line 18, it says JD again, and it says, right now I'm on Bidwell and Ocean. They took my money, man, they took my money, and it says unintelligent.
Yes.
Okay. So 3 different times he said they took something from him, correct?
Yes.
And through the course of your investigation, you determined that that wasn't true.
Yes.
Now, just a couple other questions about some of the things that you were asked. When Mr. Palms initially comes to the Internal Affairs at Journal Square there and speaks to you and you do those identifications, that wasn't the only thing you did that day, correct? Meaning you spoke to him about other things and he gave you his version of events and so on and so forth. It wasn't just what we watched or listened to.
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember what time that interview started? If I told you that it started at 9:30 in the morning, would that be fair, or do you need something to refresh your memory? Oh, you started?
Yes.
Do you remember what time you got there?
I know he got there late for our appointment.
Okay. Do you remember how long he was there before you spoke with him?
I brought him in, sat him down.
Right?
I went and grabbed my documents. He must have waited there a minute.
So the first time that you spoke with him was on the recorded video?
No.
Where did you speak with him before that?
When he got off of the elevator, I walked into the interview room and I sat him down. So for those brief few seconds.
When you say you sat him down and you spoke with him, did you speak with him about just the weather or the case?
I informed him that I would be going to grab my documents and I was going to place the camera on record, and then I'll come back to interview him.
Did you, so you didn't speak with him about his version of events or anything like that prior to when the videotape comes up? Do you know of anybody in your department that did?
No, no one did.
So, just, I'll mark this D3, just to go back to the question I had asked earlier. It is the transcript of Mr. Holmes's March 29, 2018 city meeting.
Original S3.
It wasn't, okay. So then S33. I don't, if you could just take a look at that, I have some notes on that. I don't have a clean copy. I'll put my hand over it because it has nothing to do with you. But there's a date listed on there, correct?
Yes,
And a time?
yes,
Does that refresh your recollection as to what time the interview began?
yes.
Okay. Do you have any reason to believe that's not accurate? Okay. So it says that it began at 10:30 a.m. I think if we watch, it's probably a few minutes after that, but it says it began at 10:30 a.m. Do you remember if March 29th of last year was before or after daylight savings time? You don't. If I told you that it was after, would you have any reason to believe that to be inaccurate? Okay. The reason I'm asking is, are you, from your recollection there, are you certain that this interview began at 10:30 and not 9:30 a.m.?
I cannot be sure.
You can't be sure. Okay. I have no additional questions, Judge. Thank you very much.
Mr. Hirschorn directed your attention to line 13, correct? I believe he indicated, I think he read it into the record, yes, sir, it was a cop car, and I spoke to one of the gentlemen, he took my ID, my everything, he ran my name and everything, correct?
Yes,
But there's another sentence after that, correct?
yes,
And they, one of the, not the officer that took my ID, the other guy took $600 from my brother, right?
yes,
Had the opportunity to speak to Mr. Davis, correct?
yes,
You talked to him, just like you did his brother, about what they said happened to them on March 25th, 2018, correct?
yes.
And did Mr. Davis indicate whether or not he had been drinking that night?
Judge.
Did he indicate what his state was, his physical state?
Yes.
Okay. Before I finish, I'm just curious, and I wanted to ask you. So, Officer Kudiak was at the desk that night,
Yes.
and it would, what does an officer who's manning the desk at the South District, what are their duties and responsibilities if they're working the midnight tour?
They would, back then, they would assign officers to radio cars or give them keys to the radio cars. They would answer the phone, deal with impounds, and assist the supervisor as necessary, and take calls take walk-in reports, or refer them, or have an officer come in and take the report.
As part of your investigation, did you learn that Officer Kudiak didn't take Mr. Palms as a walk-in?
Yes,
He turned him away?
I know.
You didn't come across any walk-in complaints offered by Officer Kudiak or somebody underneath him, correct?
No.
Okay. I have no further questions.